He vindicated himself in 2020. In 2019, I was working on some new intellectual property. I and part of it was I had a OneNote account that I was making a story on, originally called The Butchers of Northshore, and then I changed the title to The Culling, and something happened to my OneNote, and I was worried that some of my IP was stolen, and so I came up with a story called the duality, and I started creating new characters. Most of my stories have been copy paste the same characters. So there are the male and female protagonists are Matt and Amy, and they met at college, or they met on touring. They met on Beatport actually. They were in high school, and they're both student athletes, and they had engaged in basically the way it is Beatport is like they're on forums and they are composing music and they're exchanging files and stuff, and they've never seen what each other looked like. And while touring schools, Matt goes down to Duke. He tells Mike Krzyzewski that barring any changes, he's going to go to Duke, any drastic changes. And Amy's up at UConn. She's basically telling the same thing to the people up there. And then she goes down to Duke, where she's legacy. Her mother went there. And then Matt is going to visit his sister. And they meet on this school, and it turns out it's the only school that they're both applying to. And Matt convinces Amy to go there, where he's going to mentor her to be a better student athlete, because Amy's more focused on her basketball than her studies, although she's an incredibly smart person. Her father is a physicist and teaches at Columbia, and so Matt is based off me. It's an adaptation of a lot of the things in my life. Originally, the first draft of the story was kind of like Matt is a person where he has this vision of the future, and he's created a company, and he's going around poaching high profile interns from Fortune 500 companies. And the story was in its infancy and development. And then my grandfather died, and I was dismissed from school because I missed a probation meeting. I told them I would rather study than go to these meetings, and they said that, we want you to leave. So the story pivoted into a romance novel, and Amy is representative of Dickinson. She represents all the people I lost, all the things I love, and Matt is, based off my life. And so a lot of his personality comes from, a lot of his preferences, his likes and interests come from me, his music taste, his interest in healthcare, the pursuit of his studies, the focus of his studies. And Amy was, pulled out of thin air. She's a fictitious character, and I worked incredibly hard on her details, her mannerisms, her extended family, the lineage of her name, where she originates from. She's originally from Vancouver. Then she moves down to New York when she's about 14. And so these were primarily my only two characters for a couple stories. And I worked on that story, which I called the Philadelphia Project, but I hate the title. Perhaps if I came up with a better title, I wouldn't, the culling, which I'll call the Butchers of Northshore now, I'm embarrassed by the subject matter, because it was my attempt to create a manga-esque graphic novel story. And I figured, Stan Lee can make comic books, targeted towards a young audience, then why can't I? And then the story that's called the Philadelphia Project I'm very happy with that story because I feel it's grounded in reality. It's a mature romance, or perhaps it's not mature, but it's not, it's not silly. It's not like, I wouldn't look back on that and say, gee, I'm embarrassed by it, because it's a period piece. It represents the time I was in college. So, but I I never released it originally because I was worried about my technique. If I was going to receive criticism for something, I would want to work on something first and then, go back and release the story. How is my writing technique? How is my narration? How is my, how effective am I as a writer? And I didn't want to receive criticism on a story that dealt with the loss of my grandfather, displacement and loss of my friends, and the depression I was going through. And the whole story, the whole point of the story, is to have the audience sympathize and empathize with the male protagonist. Like Paul Haggis in Entourage, he wants the audience to weep. He wants them to care so much about the character that they weep. And I always feel like effective storytellers have us caring about the characters. We root for them, and we feel bad for them, and we feel sad for them. So that's what I hope to accomplish with this story. The other story, it was kind of like I had been involved. My friends like video games. There's comic book culture. There's Iron Man and the MCU. There's Batman and stuff, and then there was League of Legends and stuff. So it's inspired by those things. Of course, it has at its core my story, where Matt again is a healthcare. He's interested in healthcare. He's studied. He's always more like a physicist in the story. I'm not so much of a physicist in real life. I've studied physics. It was, to me, a lot of the principles and concepts were common sense to me. Centripetal force and instantaneous velocity and stuff. But for some reason, for a course that's kind of like a math course, I don't know, that it was just whatever. And then chemistry, I did okay in chemistry. I think I got an A in Gen Chem, and I got a B something in organic chemistry. I should have had an A in biochemistry, and I was so proud of myself for biochemistry because I retained the information from organic, and I was confident in my ability on like enantiomers and sterics and stuff like that, and stability, and so anyway, we're talking about the stories though. And so the character, the male protagonist, is adapted from my life. Now, not everything in the story I have experienced, but it might be, relational. So in real life, I was dismissed from Dickinson after my grandfather died, and that also happens in the story, but the reason for the dismissal in the story, there's he's at odds with the administration. There's a laboratory explosion where he jeopardizes the safety of another student, and he's also been accused of like academic dishonesty, where he was doing a math theorem that a professor challenged the student body, that he said you couldn't solve this proof, and he has some connections where he winds up solving it. And then he also takes a Gatling gun, he takes a machine gun, and shoots it at window panes at Old West. And he's testing the shatter pattern of the bullets striking the window. So when